And I was calling him to talk him out of it. Because I was like, we're not gonna put the legendary Wagner Moura through. Like, this is an insult. Like, we can't do that. And I was like, look, man, I understand if you don't, I absolutely get it if you don't want to. And he was like, man.
Catherine Janeway's on the top of my mind. I'm actually drinking out of my Captain Janeway mug right now, so very excited to talk to you.
You're a diehard. Good. It's like if you think about each facet of a character as like a side of a diamond or something. So you don't need to say like, well, but would somebody who does this be the same person who does that later? It's like you just have to commit to each thing at a time. And then that whole thing is a character from the outside.
We the hunters, bro.
Very excited to talk to both of you. Without a doubt, you are two of the best working today. Like everything the two of you are in, I absolutely love. Fantastic seeing you share the screen here. And Brian, this is just a phenomenal, amazing performance. And I was just watching this. There's a scene right in the middle of the series, the two of you in the pickup truck where you're just, not to give any spoilers away, but that scene is probably like the most definitive like love scene I've ever seen showing.
That's
right. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Thank
and
you.
It's like
Great. Yeah.
Brian, like you talk about Manny as being that character is your character's brother throughout this. How did the two of you forge this friendship when you're getting ready to film?
It was pretty instantaneous. To know Wagner and to meet Wagner is to love Wagner, honestly. He in and of himself is an experience. Like you don't just meet him, you experience Wagner. And it was an experience I didn't know I needed so badly. I myself have been on a quest to figure out my relationship to, males in my life. I didn't have a lot of great male role models. I didn't really have a lot of close brothers or anything like that. And then I met Wagner, who just reinvigorated all of that in me. And not only that, like, he's one of the best actors I've ever had the pleasure of working with and meeting. And the way that he got thrust into the show, and the responsibility that he took on, there was something that I knew I had to do most, and that was to protect Wagner. I wanted to make sure that he felt safe. I wanted to make sure he felt seen. And when we first met each other on set was our first time meeting in life. So we were in costume, and here he is, like, taking this job that he took on a Friday on set on a Monday, and we're shooting the scene in the van, and we hadn't even, like, figured out what our favorite candy was yet. And so he pulled me into a room, locked the door, and we got close, and, like, we linked forearms and just stood there, and he was like, "Hi, I'm Wagner. This is my family. I'm this old. I'm scared," And I said the same thing back to him, and I made a promise. I was like, "I got you, man. No matter what it is, I'll be by your side." And I think that elevated Ray and Manny, because deep down, like you said, it's truly a love story. And if that connection isn't there, then you lose the whole thing. And I'm so grateful that Wagner was able to bring that.
I really love that you saw that scene as a love scene.
Yeah, we've been saying
exactly
that.
how we thought
that's
that
how we
scene
felt
should
it.
be.
That's how we played it. Yeah.
And Wagner, you feel the same way in return? Like, was it the same experience for you?
I love this man. He's like, this with Brian. It was a very scary thing for me to take this job, because I was like you said. I mean, I spoke with Ridley and Peter Craig on a Friday, and I was supposed to be on set shooting on Monday. Yeah. And I as much as I love, I Ridley Scott. On all that. The characters and everything. I wasn't sure if I was able to do that. And it was only when Brian called me. He called me, and I didn't see him. It was just a phone call thing. And I heard his voice, and I was like, I'm doing this.
And I was calling him to talk him out of it. Because I was like, we're not gonna put the legendary Wagner Moura through. Like, this is an insult. Like, we can't do that. And I was like, look, man, I understand if you don't, I absolutely get it if you don't want to. And he was like, amen.
And we met, and like he said, we saw each other for the first time in costumes. But I felt an immediate connection with him, an immediate connection with Brian, like a sort of like a spiritual thing. And I don't know, I don't know how much this, I'm a true believer in things that you can't see, that you just feel. And I think that was one of them. And I know, and he really took care of me throughout the because I was in a very vulnerable state. you know, as an actor, as a person, or things going on in my life too. And he really took care of me, and he's still doing it. And I trust him, and I love him, and I have him as a brother till for life.
Yeah, man.
And I think that I might, and when you say things like that, oh, I saw that scene as a love, that makes us so
You
happy.
have no idea, man.
Because the thing that for us that makes this show so different and unique is that these characters involved in this such a violent thing, especially being a black and a Latino man involved in a violent situation, they are not the stereotype of that kind of show that you used to see. There is tenderness, there's love, and especially they don't want to be there. They are not good at what they're doing,
No.
and they were just thrown into that situation. So it's we're very proud of the show, and
Yeah.
and the most important thing for me is the journey, and I couldn't have had a better journey with these dude here. Like it's
Well, you're both phenomenal in the series. Can't wait for everybody to check it out. Thank you so much for your time today. And congratulations.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Very excited. Catherine Janeway's on the top of my mind. I'm actually drinking out of my Captain Janeway mug right now. So very excited to talk to you.
You're a diehard. Good.
Yes, very much so. This character, I didn't know what to expect because it could have very easily just been a cliche with the accent and leave it. But this is such a cool character. There's glimpses into the backstory and just little things that are peppered into the things that you say. How did you kind of figure out how to play this character?
Well, first of all, I fell in love with her. This is the most important thing. I mean, if you don't love your character, and I think Streep once said, you have to fight for your character above all things. You have to fight for her integrity. And so I had to fight also for her nuance and her subtleties and all of that stuff. The accent I wanted to do, Peter Craig wanted me to do it. I thought that was a challenge that I would find very interesting. I hope I nailed that. She's something on the outside, but she's a palimpsest. If you just carefully turn the page, you see that there's another Teresa under that, and then again another one. So it's that's how I approached it. Many, many layers, and each and every one of them delicate, and I hope unexpected.
Very much so. And I think the word that you hit there, integrity, also kind of applies, Nesta, for your character, that I think the two of your characters are maybe the two most decent, wholesome people in the entire story. And for you, Nesta, in playing this character, there's like just little nuances again, like the whole thing with the Quaker background and switching from being a prosecutor to a defense attorney, all of these elements that really kind of give you a glimpse into who she is. How did you figure out all of those elements and bringing those together in the role?
Thank you for asking that. It honestly took me a little bit of time and work. I have a coach from Vancouver that I work with on most of my projects because we break down scenes together and characters together. We don't do like the emotional work per se, but we intellectualize the script in a way that I find is helpful for me. And as we were doing that work, I was really trying to figure out who Michelle is and what she wants, because I do feel like she was kind of a walking contradiction. Maybe like even for my own like implicit bias, I was like, why is she so quirky and like loving, but she was a prosecutor and now she's a defense attorney and she's representing like criminals, and it just I couldn't quite nail her because I couldn't put her into a box, and she wasn't your typical lawyer character. But I think once I realized who she was, and I then fell in love with her, and I realized her. I was able to step into a woman who is just trying to do the right thing at all times, and who's very driven by her philosophy and her morality, and is, because of her belief and her religion in Quakerism, is also trying to implement love into people and trying to make the world better, like in her tiny way. And from there, it kind of all made sense to me.
And I think love is a beautiful key word, because this, for a show about drugs and crime, there's so much love between all the different character dynamics here, especially between like Brian and Wagner, the way they portray their characters. But Kate, there's a moment where you're kind of explaining to Ray about how Therese became the mother character, and it's just such a profoundly quiet but beautiful moment. What was it like filming that scene?
I loved it. I think I've said more than 5 times that it was probably one of my favorites. Beautifully constructed scene by Peter Craig, where she reveals herself after all of these years to her de facto son. And it doesn't require the courage that you would see on Hallmark television. It requires a certain uncovering of love, almost mysterious in its simplicity, that you just give it to the other person. You give it and you know that they will receive it as it is meant to be received. And Brian did. I mean, playing with him is a little bit like playing with heaven. He's so completely present. You can't ask for anything more. So yes, I think it was that scene. I loved it. Yeah, thank you for pointing it out.
And thank you so much both for your time today. This series is going to blow people away because it's not a crime series. It's so much more than that. I cannot wait for everybody to check it out. Thank you again so much for your time.
Oh, that's so great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Very excited to talk to both of you. Marin, I got to say, in the last 5 years, you have been in 3 films, 3 TV shows, and an audiobook that each one of them I was wowed. And I honestly think that this may be the most mind-blowing of all of them. Like, this is one of the most exceptional performances I've seen in such a long time.
My gosh.
It's amazing that you go from, the scene in the first episode in the truck to not being able to speak to the best iteration of the quick brown fox I've ever heard, all the way through to the very end of the series. It's like so many layers to this character. How did you kind of just orient yourself in playing her?
I think for me, I kept having to remind myself of something that we talk about in theater sometimes a lot, where it's like if you think about each facet of a character as like a side of a diamond or something. So you don't need to say like, well, but would somebody who does this be the same person who does that later? It's like you just have to commit to each thing at a time. And then that whole thing is a character from the outside, because I felt like she really transformed physically as well as emotionally throughout this process. She's dealing with deeply impacted grief that's so buried in her in the beginning, but also as a woman who, in the metaphor of losing her voice and then gaining it, getting it back again, it was something that I got to sort of inhabit physically, something that is a psychological and emotional state as well. And I had to just commit to each thing as it came along and just take that ride. And it's such a big gift as an actor to get to do something where every episode it was almost like a whole new set of challenges for me. And that's all you want as an actor, truly. It was a big
it was awesome to watch.
Present.
It was awesome to watch.
And, equally so for you, Amir, this character that we commonly see in a lot of crime shows and films can sometimes be relegated to the cop or the agent, and it's just kind of a cliche. But Mark is not. He's really kind of hands in all of these different elements of the case and kind of trying to keep the glue together and keep characters from going in the wrong direction. Like, how did you kind of find yourself in the grand scheme of this whole story?
I appreciate that very much. When I auditioned, it was a very straightforward, like you said, sort of cop, DEA boss. But right before the audition, I got a note from casting. They said, "Oh, and make the character fun." I said, "Oh, that's interesting." And I found it to be quite dry. And so I threw in, I just kind of improvised a few sarcastic jokes in there. And then I got the job. So that was very encouraging. Knowing that they were open to whatever. So that was my starting point. And then when I sort of saw the story and got the scripts, I was very aware of that sort of, I don't want to call it, because Peter didn't do this, it was amazing, but the trope of the cop who's on the case and off the case and on the case, and really just wanted to make sure his intentions were as pure as they could be, even if he was, quote unquote, had the pressure of politics and optics and government and budget. Me and Peter always talked about, he had to protect the budget, for the greater good. We can't blow up the department on one case. We have to protect, but so you don't know. So all of those things, but then you're thrown in and you're given great scene partners opposite great characters. And it ends up becoming, they say every Chekhov scene is a love story. Every scene was a familiar. A lot with Marin and Will Pullen, who played Marchetti, was very familial. And so then you can go places that maybe not traditional cop shows go, not traditional sort of boss stick in the muds go. And that was that was what I was hoping to do, and it was a delight to work with Peter to help me do that.
Well, it's a phenomenal series. You're both fantastic in it. And Marin, I just got to say, it's Birth, Rebirth, Umbrella Academy, and the Sleeping Beauties audiobook. Right there's a masterclass. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
And now these people are looking for us.
Let's go! Let's go! You took our money and dope. Now I have to kill everybody you know.
This series just caught me completely off guard with how fantastic it is. I absolutely loved it from beginning to end. And I think maybe I've been a little bit... There's so many true crime adaptations these days that watching this, I'm thinking to myself, was this a true story? Like, it just feels so rich and real and organic, and everything feels like it's grounded, that these could have been real people. How much of this do you feel was on the page and how this was adapted versus what Brian and Wagner and everybody brought to their roles? Like, where do you think a lot of this came from?
It's all of that. And I'll answer. There's a couple questions embedded in each other there. I'll ask it. It has happened in the world. It could happen and has happened.
Right.
We weren't depicting anybody specifically. So but it definitely has happened out there. It's a problem. And then in terms of what's on the page and what Wagner and Brian brought to their roles, I mean, that's a collaboration that I absolutely love. There's an awful lot on the page, as much as I could get there, but I always do believe that the actor kind of completes it. I mean, they're the ones with all the emotional intelligence. They're the ones that are on the ground that really have to do it and feel the authenticity of it. So, I mean, I freed those guys to do what they needed to do, and they just added so many layers and were so loving to the characters as they were depicting them. They were so intelligent in their portrayals that I'm so grateful that we had all that time together. The three of us got to be really close in doing that.
There's a scene, not to give any spoilers or anything, but in the middle, there's that scene in the pickup truck with the two of them where they're face to face. And I was telling them that feels like the most definitive portrait of brotherly love that I've seen on screen before. Like, was that just an intense moment to get that entire scene on film?
Yeah, it was. It's written that way, and it was like when I was writing it, I was trying to just turn up the volume as high as I could. I was trying to think of something that takes that classic argument that you'd normally have, or that, I won't call it an argument, no spoilers, but that scene between the two of them, and just make it as tense as you possibly could. Filming it was fun for me, not for them. I mean, they were exhausted. They were lying on the pavement between takes on that. And they were yelling at me between takes, like just giving everything they had and then just screaming, "Fuck you, Peter," because they were like, "God damn it." But at the same time, they loved it because you give them so much to play with. And these are actors that I don't think either of them have hit their ceilings yet in terms of how good they are. So the more we threw at them, the better. And that scene came off. I really feel like we've all talked about the show as if we can get people to that scene, we've really got people hooked, I think.
And, everybody these days, when a novel is adapted and is turned into a limited series, there's always that opportunity, if it becomes a hit, that they go, well, maybe we can turn this into an ongoing series. Was this always envisioned as a finite ending for you, or did you think this is something you could revisit these characters?
So it was envisioned as a finite ending, but the thing is even when you're writing any ending, anything, in a movie, a book, I've written all of them, you still want to have a feeling of here's where the story goes if it goes on, because that's just kind of what life is. There's no definitive endings other than death, unfortunately, the one definitive ending. If characters are pointing off in a direction, it gives you your direction. So it's there, but it was conceived to feel like there was that little tilt, that little uplift of resolution that you could tell where lives were going to be rebuilt from that point onward.
Well, it's a phenomenal series. I am sure people are going to love it. Thank you so much for your time and congratulations.
Yeah, it's a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo remains an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.